I'll turn that. Just mute it. And Facebook. There we go. We are live. Just mute that. Very good. And 258. Very good. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Satsang with G. And you can just type in chat there. You know, I'd love to hear who you are, where you're from, and make sure you can all hear me. I think the sound is okay. Make sure the sound is up on this guy while we start into the to Facebook. I'm going to hit Facebook Live now. So hello, everyone, and so good to be with you today. Yes, it's Thanksgiving weekend. We've all had lots of stuff to be grateful for. It's almost over. And hello, Helen. Welcome from Spain. I love it. You know, it's so amazing that the majority of the people that tune in to listen to me are not in the United States, where I am, which I think is like really, really cool. I think it shows the possibility of the internet and what it can do for us. The subject today, the thing I wanted to at least kick it off with, was the Heart Sutra. And of course, I invite all questions anytime. I'll pick them up and answer them. I do invite you to, if you got 3 or 4 questions, you got a bunch of different questions in your mind, sort them all out and come up with the one that's the most pressing, the one that has the most emotional charge to it, the one that has the most sense of urgency about it, or the one that seems the most deeply spiritual. Because in Satsang, I have the wonderful opportunity to focus completely on the end game. Many of you here have taken some of my classes, and you've learned about inner reconciliation, which, by the way, we're making a major shift on the hello from Kazakhstan, from Canada, from England, Pam, Turtulova. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Turtulova, beautiful name, and the Undead Consparrow from Canada. The thing about it, when I teach inner reconciliation, it really is a path, and maybe I'll do a show on that sometime, just about the nature of how we get to the state where we're prepared to truly awaken, and what that means. And so I spend a lot of time building bridges, working with people where they are. Hello from Mexico, Johanna, beautiful. I spend a lot of time working with people where they are, beginning to build that bridge from our, the understanding we have of the world, the experience we have of the world, all of our conditioning and programming and the like, up to the point where our energy system, our nervous system, our hearts, our minds are actually prepared to step into the big questions. And in the big questions is where you begin to move into the end game. The thing I like about Satsang is that I just go right to the end game. I can, in this setting, I could take everything right to the end game. It's kind of like getting a peek as to where this is all headed. And then I can back off to the places where we feel stuck, where our energy is frustrated, where we're afraid, we're feeling lack, we're feeling self-doubt, we're feeling devalued, all the stuff that goes with our modern life. But in Satsang, the opportunity is to put all of that aside and just pretend like you're completely prepared for the ultimate awakening, that you don't require any preparation, that you don't need 30 years in a monastery or sitting on a cushion meditating, that you don't have to, do penance for bad things you've done in past lives. Because the fact of the matter is the truth is always the truth. It's always available right here, right now. And the only thing standing between you and that is your beliefs. That's it. So you don't need a process. You don't need a bridge. You don't need a bunch of practices. All you need is the willingness to look, because the truth is direct. We can go direct to what is actually true. There, you actually experience the inner conflict and the like, and all of the conditioned patterns that resist that truth because they don't know any better. So I wanted to talk today about the Heart Sutra. Fortuna from Scotland, Barbro from Sweden. This is amazing. We have nobody here. Judy! Just got our first one in from the USA. And somebody is asking how to apply shunyata in the Heart Sutra in everyday life and inner reconciliation, law of attraction 2.0. Great question. Thank you. Thank you for that. Because I'm going to be talking exactly about that. Because the Heart Sutra is really an amazing piece of work. And, I must have read it a dozen times before I finally started to get it, over a long period of time too, before I finally started to get it. And if you really want to understand it, there's a version of it. The translation and commentary are by a fellow named Red Pine. And he is my favorite translator of Buddhist text out there. I think I have everything he's written because they're just so poignant and human and full of insight. So Red Pine, the Heart Sutra, you can get it on. I've got them all on Kindle, right? But you can still buy them as well. The Heart Sutra is one of the most remarkable documents. I mean, some of Buddha's sutras, they talk about the perfection of wisdom in 100,000 lines, right? And in 9,000 lines. The Heart Sutra is 36 lines long. That's the entire thing. But in that 36 lines, he covers every single aspect of Buddhist teaching and brings it to the place, as Undead Conspero talked about, this place of shunyata, this place of emptiness. Now, I actually did an entire, I think it's like 2.5 hours I did going in all sorts of detail as to the nature of the Heart Sutra, breaking the whole thing down. That is part of Inner Reconciliation Level 3, which you have to go through the other 2 levels to get to get to level 3. So I can't go into it as in depth here as I would there, but I did want to bring your attention to it because it holds the key for coming to understand everything that's going on in our modern world, everything that's going on within ourselves, and of course, the modern world is nothing more than a reflection of what's going on in here. And it breaks it down to its essence. And its essence is very simply this. Everything you experience is actually a perception of your mind. There's no objective truth. There's no material universe. There's no history. There's no past. There's no karma. There's no suffering, and there is no sufferer. All of those are creations of the mind and not objective facts or truth. Imagine that everything you're experiencing untoward, everything that's causing you pain and suffering is completely a creation of the mind. Let's see, Christina from Big Sky, US, which is, I think, Montana. Papinu from Arizona. Indus is from Wembley, which is in England. Thank you all for being here. Here from the start. Oh, Hanan, I'm here too from the start. Truth Speaks. Joan, hi, John. They go by real fast on Facebook, so if I don't catch you, I'm sorry. I like to acknowledge everybody who's come. It's really great. So I want you to ponder that little tidbit. I mean, it shows up in things like metaphysics and the law of attraction and the like, but it's very diluted, right? So put all of that aside. Put everything you know about this idea. Well, you create your own reality. It's not that at all. It's Chrissy from New Zealand. Hi. It's not that at all. You creating your own reality. It's similar, and on the surface, it sounds like it's that, but it's way, way more than that. The beautiful thing about it is that there are 45,000 Buddhist sermons, sutras. Something is called a sutra because it's believed to be that originated with the Buddha himself. If it's an interpretation or something, they call it a shastra. It has a different name. This is the only of all 45,000 Buddhist sutras that Buddha didn't actually speak. It was spoken by his most well-known disciple, Avalokiteshvara. So well-known and so important was Avalokiteshvara that he mutated in different cultures into different things. He became, throughout all of Asia, the goddess Kanon, Kanzeon, Kwanum, Kuan Yin. These are all different names. And you've all seen the woman holding the oil, standing on the lotus and the light. She's the goddess of compassion, but she's also the goddess of wisdom. The beauty of the Heart Sutra is that term heart in English, either refers to this here or the heart of the matter, or, your deepest feelings and the like. And in the West, we have this split between the heart and the mind. You say there's the heart, which, it's been reduced to sentimentality and the like. And then we got the mind, which is intellect. That is a completely arbitrary division between the two. And in the genuine Buddhist teachings and even the Tao and the philosophies of the East, they are simply two aspects of the same thing. As a matter of fact, in Chinese and Cantonese and Mandarin, the symbol for heart and the symbol for mind are the same symbol. They don't have the same kind of distinction between the two that we do in the West. And that's really, really important. Because on one hand, you have this masculine energy of wisdom, the ultimate wisdom, the prajnaparamita, as he puts it, of Avalokiteshvara, a masculine figure, which then becomes the feminine figure as it translated throughout the East. And in fact, there's a very slight Avalokiteshvara and Avalokiteshvara. So there's one letter difference, and that name becomes feminine. So really, what we're talking about here is, in 36 lines, the entire essence of Buddhism. If you understand this, it doesn't matter. You can read all the other 45,000 and you will understand them perfectly. I'm going to try to give you the gist of it. And the gist of it is the term emptiness, or in the Sanskrit, shunyata. It said that Avalokiteshvara, and Avalokiteshvara simply means one who looks down. Not down on, like condescending, but one who's looking down from this place of pure eternal bliss, of pure emptiness, looking down upon us, the world, those who are suffering. And he said, and it says that seeing that all the 5 skandhas were empty, right? Now the 5 skandhas, it's beautiful. I also do this in Inner Reconciliation. I think it's also in level 2, where I take apart perception. When we perceive things, we perceive it as, there's the object out there, right? And then the light strikes the object and it hits the eye and we have the sensation of light, right? But then that goes, at this point, it's just stuff. It gets put together in an image, right? Now suddenly we have an image in here that we think matches an image out there. So now all of a sudden we have a perception. And from that perception, puts together memory and identification also, and now it becomes an object, right? Now the mind has got some, it's not just, just raw, undifferentiated experience, like you're looking at something, you have no idea what it is. Now there's a mental object, an object of mind that goes along with it, an understanding. And then that in its totality makes up what we experience as consciousness. That's our modern definition. Everybody recognizes that, right? The object, the light, the seeing, the physical sensation of it, the perception of it, the object of mind, and the totality of experience around it. That's what everybody experiences. That is, in fact, 2,600 years ago, exactly what the Buddha outlined as the five skandhas, which was a model of everything we experience ever. And then he laid the bombshell, though. Now, the five skandhas, the means by which everything is perceived, right? You have no experience outside of that realm of perception, right? Check for yourself. Is there anything you experience that is outside of your perception? So this is a map of everything in your life. Everything happens this way, right? So if we understand this, we understand it all. We understand exactly what's happening. But then he goes on, he says, pondering the five skandhas, the mode of experience, the mode of perception, and recognizing that they are empty. Now, what does that word empty mean? It doesn't mean that it's a void, there's nothing there. What it means is that it is empty of an absolute objective existence. That means it doesn't exist separate from your perception of it. Oh, this is so critical. And this is not light, right? I'm not doing light. This is satsang. We're not doing lightweight here. I'm not soft pedaling this. I'm pushing you right into the heart of it. He's saying that everything you perceive, Pepita, I'm doing it. Yeah, thanks. Everything you perceive doesn't exist independently of your perceiving it. Think about it like a dream you have at night. It's all experienced as if it was objective, right? There's actually people, you're having conversations, maybe you're having some good sex or something, right? It's fun, things are happening, you're afraid, you're turned on, you're curious, you could have different bodies, all sorts of things, right? When you step out of the dream, when you wake from the dream, you realize that none of it was objective. It felt objective, but none of it existed outside of your perception. In other words, it was a creation of the mind. What Avalokiteshvara is saying is that everything you experience is a creation of the mind and doesn't exist separate from the mind. And this is an exact 180 degrees from the modern materialistic view that everything is material and we are perceiving it. What he's saying is nothing is material. It is empty of inherent existence. Then he takes it even further, and he starts systematically going through all of the major teachings of Buddhism and showing that they too are empty. He does it with the five skandhas, then he does it with the Four Noble Truths, which is one of the most, sacred pillars of Buddhism. And then he also takes apart the three treasures. The three treasures of Buddhism are regarded as the absolute. It's the Buddha, the Sangha, and the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And even in Buddhism, they would say that the Buddhas, they come and go. There have been many Buddhas, and there are more Buddhas to come. That the Sangha, which is just a community of those who are following the path and are living it and are being together, they come and go. But according to the three treasures, the Dharma does not come and go. It is, the teaching remains forever. That's what the teaching is. That's what Dharma means, the teaching. Avalokitesvara says, all dharmas are empty. All teaching is empty. Now, many of you have heard me talk about my own teaching as, this is just a model. This is temporary. This is just something, it's a way, it's a teaching mechanism. It's a device to illustrate a point. It's a metaphor, it's an archetype. It's a way of explaining something that is beyond it. In other words, nothing I teach is absolute. It is not an absolute truth. It is a device in the moment to convey to you, whoever's listening to me, whatever's most necessary in the moment, aimed directly at your particular level of understanding to try to bring you to the next level. Which means that nothing I teach, nothing anyone teaches is an absolute truth. It is all empty of objective existence. So even the thing we regard as the highest truth is a creation of your mind. And the truthfulness or falsity of it is a projection of the mind. Nothing is true. Nothing is inherently true. Now, plenty of relative stuff, right? Plenty of relative stuff. You know, my name, you know, this is water and I'm thirsty and it tastes good. You know, that we've agreed that we stop at red lights. Now, there's nothing inherent about red that says stop, right? But we've all agreed that it's going to mean that. So stop signs are red, stoplights are red. Red has come to mean something. Does red inherently mean danger or stop? No. It has no inherent meaning at all. That's what emptiness is. It means that everything is just a concept. Everything's just an idea. Some very destructive, some very useful. And of course, if I hold on to an idea or a concept, and I insist that it is the absolute truth, and I think somehow it's true, not because I made it true, because it's objectively true, that is the origin of suffering. All of it right there. Holding on to something is being objectively true and missing the fact that the only reason it's true is because you said so. Are you following this, everybody? Are you getting this? Now, this can make us feel very, very shaky because, well, then where do I land? Well, Avalokitesvara covers that too. But what he's doing, he's taking away every place that we normally stand thinking this is it. And you come back to the most simple place there is. And that is the place of simply your own existence, which is not objective, is not a concept, is not something made up. It's not something that has to be verified from the outside. It is self-evident and self-luminous. And that's what he calls the emptiness. Just feel your own existence right now. It's universal, it has no form, it has no shape. You can't just, say that's what I am. It is empty of all inherent existence except for itself. Now, everything has started somewhere, right? If I'm going to say that this is true and this is false, I got to be there first. Something real, substantial, solid is there that's saying, boom, that's true, that's false. And if you can see that it's not inherently true or false, then the real meaning of truth goes where? Comes right back to you. You are the truth. Your being is the truth. And this is what Avalokiteshvara called the prajna paramita. Prajna means wisdom. Paramita means to the other side. So it's the wisdom that takes you to the other side. What was he talking about? Greetings from the Green Mountains of Vermont. Hello, Mark. What is he talking about when he says, take you to the other side? He's taking you out of the realm of the subjective, which we suffer when we believe it to be objective, into that place of just the pure being. The wisdom that takes you to the other side is nothing out there is objective. The only thing that is absolute is you. Not even the concept of you, by the way. The concept of you is an idea you have about yourself that you believe to be true that isn't objectively true. What is objectively true? Your Buddha nature, what you actually are, pure existence. Now this seems like, yeah, well, so what? But I've got all these things. And somebody even asked the question here, how to actually be yourself. Let's see. Undead Conspiro. I believe you're a man. So if I was to ask you, well, how do you actually be a man? You go, huh? So when somebody asks me, how do I be myself? I go, well, when aren't you yourself? You see, what's happening in with that question is the mind is trying to find some object, some concept of you that says, that's what I am. Oh, now how do I be that? How do I act out that? How do I, act like the guru or the spiritual person, or act like the cool guy, or act like or act soft and gentle, or act strong, right? Those are all masks you could put on, right? But who's putting on the mask? Before you can actually say, how do I be myself? How can you not be yourself? And notice your concept of you is unstable. It's changing. But you, how do you not be yourself? No matter what you think you are, does it change what you actually are? If the person goes totally mad and believes themselves to be a duck, does that make them a duck? No, they're just perceptions are all distorted. They've gone insane. Well, we've all gone a little insane. We're buying this idea that somehow we are something other than what we are. The thing is that what you actually are is pure emptiness. It has no attributes, it has no quality. You can't point to it. You can't talk about it. You can't describe it. So the mind can't know it. Are you following that? The mind cannot understand it because it's not an object. You can't look at it and say, oh, that's a glass. You can't do it. You can't point to you. You can point to the body, but even look at your body, right? Something is perceiving the body. Is the thing that is perceiving the body made of the body? Is it perceivable in and of itself? This is what training is needed. The only kind of process needed is to take this inquiry so seriously that you really examine it and notice how your mind is constantly searching for an object. Well, you're not going to find an object. No matter how long your mind searches. And people have been searching for this forever. I mean, the 3,000 years ago, I think 2,500, 3,000 years ago, the idea of the material universe, of the objective universe, which gave rise to classical analysis, which gave rise to all of our modern sciences, right, came from the Greeks, and they concluded that what you were looking at is not the same as the one looking at it. And the way to understand what I was looking at was to break it into its component parts. Okay, it's not made, it's got to be made of something independently of me. The Greeks coined the phrase matter, created that as a concept. And they also created the concept of the atom, which they assumed if they could take anything and break it down small enough, they'd find this indivisible particle. That is the sum total of what we all believe about ourselves, right? There's another alternative way of looking at it, and that is it isn't objective, that it's totally subjective, that we are within a consciousness, and that consciousness is primary. That consciousness, though, not being an object, cannot be perceived. This is what is meant by the word in Sanskrit, it's shunyata. In English, it's translated emptiness. And according to Avalokiteshvara, this is the highest wisdom there is. There's nothing beyond it. This is the Buddha mind. He said it is from the Prajnaparamita. He referred to it as the mother of all Buddhas, that all Buddhas came from and returned to the Prajnaparamita. The form, all the words I'm using right now are emerging from that. I'm not their source. I don't know what my next thought's going to be. It just happens. Where does it come from? It comes from there. Your thoughts all come from there. Everything comes from there. Grab a couple more questions here. What to do with this knowledge, GP? Very, very good. I'm glad you asked that. Another one is from Marxie. I'll get a second. Hurt my mind. That'd actually be yourself. What we think we are is often the result of conditioning. It's 100% the result of conditioning. And until you have experienced at least partially some degree of awakening, the entire self-image you have is conditioning. It is produced by the nervous system in reaction and response to the environment. That's a big one. Everything you say, oh, this is what I am. No, it's not. That is the conditioning. You, consciousness, believed that conditioned pattern to be yourself, and that was the beginning of suffering. That was the fall. Often the result, which is we think that we are, what we think we are is often the result of conditioning, which is an unreliable way of seeing our true selves. Yeah, it's impossible. The conditioned mind and the true mind, the awakened mind, have nothing in common with each other. Although the awakened mind, being the higher of the two, is quite capable of understanding and perceiving the lesser of the two, the conditioned mind. And in fact, the conditioned mind isn't a mind that's been conditioned. The conditioning produced the mind. Mind is only a word that we gave as an abstraction to the conditioning. I have time to get into that because it's really very powerful. But this is your nature is emptiness. It is the nature of all things. So if nothing exists independent of my perception of it, if nothing has inherent existence, then its nature is emptiness. Right? Now, this doesn't leave us in a blank, right? I notice everything in this room is a perception. Everything that you're looking at right now is a perception of something else. Right? We don't take them to be absolutes. If we take it to be an absolute, all of a sudden you're stuck in it. How to use the conditioning as a tool. I'm afraid I don't understand that questioning. The conditioning isn't a tool. Conditioning is a mistake. Well, to believe yourself to be that conditioning is the mistake. Conditioning isn't a mistake. Everything's conditioned. This glass is conditioning. You know, the various elements, the particle, the stuff it's made of was conditioned into this form, right? Now, is everything that this glass was made out of stuck being a glass? And if I took it apart and find those, is it a glass? If I go and find a bunch of little glasses, right? So this is the conditioning of something else. It's appearing temporarily as this glass. And I could take this, grind this to powder, put it some other places, reuse it into something else. The exact same elements that were here could now be something else, right? I could take gold, I could melt it down. I could take a beautiful gold statue, melt it down and make one of those huge, you know, belt buckles they have for, you know, boxing and wrestling and stuff. The gold's identical. There's absolutely no difference. The substance is the same, but the form is different. That's what's meant. The form is empty. The nature of the form is emptiness. Are you following this, everybody? Hanan says, GP, I understand that my existence is purely my perception of it and cannot exist outside of it. Can you speak of shared experiences we're all having now listening to you? How does that figure in? Yeah, how does that figure in? Yes. The only reason that seems odd is that because you believe that you are a consciousness amongst many consciousnesses. So you see, you're a little pocket of consciousness, and that I'm a little pocket of consciousness, and everybody listening right now is a little pocket of consciousness. Okay? That's a perception of it, right? What if that perception is not true? You are perceiving consciousness as if it was delineated. It's a shared experience because there's only one consciousness. Consciousness is simply experiencing itself. Now that's hard because, again, the conditioning has identified itself with this body. So it sees here, and now consciousness becomes localized, you know, this little somewhere up here in the brain, right? There's this little spot where everything comes together, right? In fact, I heard some biologists talking the other day, analyzing all of the brain. We have this perception that there's this like center place that everything comes together and we make decisions. But the reality is there is no such place in the brain. There's, you know, hundreds of different parts of the brain, and they're all responding to different things, and they don't talk to each other. There is no center of the whole thing, right? The consciousness that you are experiencing is the consciousness, not yours and mine, but the one consciousness, which is why, of course, we are having a common experience. And that common experience in its reality is empty. But it is being experienced simultaneously from multiple points of view, each one seeing it from that perspective, each one seeing it as the emptiness, but its nature is still empty. Because without me perceiving it here and you perceiving it this way, right? There'd be no common experience. And to take away that perception, the thing being perceived just disappears. The perception and the thing are one. And the perception of you perceiving is one. And the perception of you perceiving something and me perceiving something else and everybody else having its common or uncommon experience is all being experienced in the same place by the same being. That one being is being itself. So being is speaking right now. The great I am is speaking right now. The great I am is hearing right now. This is the most, I mean, it seems really esoteric to people, especially they try to get to the oneness right? You don't have to get to the oneness. We are the oneness. There's only one. There's only one being. Hope that's clear. It's not complicated, but it is the only reason that people struggle with this, anyone struggles with this, is because our minds cannot grasp one. You understand? The mind only grasps in terms of an object, right? It can only see this in terms of that. It sees that this is a glass because of the space around it. It compares the glass with this mouse, right? Now they're two distinct things, but how do you compare something that doesn't have a form and doesn't have an opposite? I mean, it is not knowable by the mind. This is why this is why scientists, the materialistic scientists, cannot approach this. There's nothing there. There's nothing objective to study. And the whole foundation of science is objective truth. They're trying to prove that something exists independent of my perception of it, which is, of course, absolutely impossible. They've been trying for 3,000 years to do it, and nobody's ever done it. Nobody's ever found this particle we've been looking at. I'll tell you, if I go for a week, and if I can't find something, I just give up on it and say, forget about it. I wouldn't go 3,000 years looking for something, and I would just say, it ain't there. I mean, you can search the entire face of the planet over 3,000 years. So let's see here. So how to use the conditioning as a tool? Don't use the conditioning as a tool. Don't think of it in those terms. Just notice that the conditioning happened. Conditioning is just the natural way the energy system works. I mean, it is conditioning that allows you to ride a bicycle, right? If you actually had to think about it every single time, the conditioning learns, it responds to the environment. At first you get up, you fall over. Little by little, the nervous system begins to detect the tiny little motions and correct for them in just the right amount that keeps you balanced. After a while, you don't even think about it. It's happening automatically. Playing piano, speaking. Listen to a little child. I'm with my granddaughter, right? And she's and she's imitating things, but there's no speech there yet, except uh-oh. That's the only thing that's come out so far, right? But it's this constant, you can see the whole energy searching out, trying to put the mouth in the right place, make the form. It's all conditioning, as is the conditioning that knows how to react to the environment, what to show, what not to show. It's all the same kind of the system, but none of it is you. All of it is the functioning of the environment. All of it is the natural functioning of the body. The only mistake we make, the essence of the spiritual journey, is to recognize that you have identified consciousness, have identified with the body and conditioning and memories and all of that stuff. And therefore feel as if you are contained in the conditioning. Now you're not. You just believe yourself to be. But if I believe I'm infinite consciousness, and now all of a sudden I believe myself to be contained within this body, an individual person with other individual persons, I'm going to feel fear, I'm going to feel shame, I'm going to feel cut off, I'm going to feel separate. That's the fall. Now you aren't contained within that. You never were. But consciousness identifying with it feels as if it's true. Now, if we can see that it isn't true, that the conditioning is just the functioning of life, we begin to withdraw our identification from it. We begin to see that we're the conscious awareness that is aware of it, and that it isn't me. And now the gap begins to get big, and you're on the threshold of awakening. But if I tell my banker my nature is emptiness, he's still going to say, where's your mortgage payment? You had another one before that about getting hit by a bus. What am I missing here? How does this help me in the real world? I love that question. How does it help me in the real world? Right? Notice how deeply you believe that you are this mortal being in this real world. And that's exactly what I'm trying to point you. It's not true. Do you think God struggles with making the mortgage? Think about it for a second. Look at all the things that you feel threatened by. Right? All of them are conditioning. And all of them feel like a threat because of your identification with them. Now, mind you, I can take you through inner reconciliation, which breaks this whole thing down and makes it very, very simple. This is satsang. We're at the end game, right? I'm not taking you through any process to get you. I'm showing you exactly what the essence of the entire thing is. Inner reconciliation started here at that revelation and worked all the way back to the beginning as to how to get somebody there, how to bring somebody to that point, how to get someone to understand that they were not their conditioning, right? So I want to make that clear because I don't want to sound flippant when I push this on you. But what you're saying is there, your nature is emptiness. That's a fact. But you don't trust it. You don't believe that emptiness can pay your mortgage, you know, even though emptiness spins galaxies and is the cause of life itself. And as Judy says, it works. The more you're in the emptiness, the less you're concerned about it, and the more it happens. Right? So what you're missing is, how does this help me? First off, is the idea of you're holding of yourself as this me in a real threatening world. But I'm trying to point out, that's a picture in your mind and not real, not the reality. It's not an objective truth. It is a deeply held belief. And if that belief wasn't there, there'd be no fear. And if there was no fear, there'd be no expression of fear in the world. Bingo, you got it. She just said bingo. Wonderful. You see it? Do you see it? It's just a picture in the mind. But we are so conditioned to believe that what we are seeing is objective and not subjective. We think it's coming, we're perceiving it and it's coming to us when in fact it's coming from us, that we now see ourselves as this little shivering me, right? In this huge cold universe, and I can barely make my mortgage payment. All a creation of the mind, none of it true. Chrissy adds, yes, it does. It works. There's plenty of people here who can show you exactly how it works. But you know, I love satsang because I get to go to the end game. You know, it took me a long time to work back to the beginning and create inner reconciliation. I've been doing this for 40 years, and it took me 2 years to actually break it down and make this so it was understandable on every level. And a gradual, gentle healing process that brings you eventually to this point. You go, my God, the entire thing is a picture in my mind. And then we all have a big laugh together. we have a beer, drink some wine, we hang out, and we go, it's the big cosmic joke. Nawaf al-Rain. Oh God, I've just butchered your name. I'm so sorry. Nawaf al-Orlaini. Beautiful name, but boy, this hopelessly went to the Anglo boys having a hard time. I love all the people from around the country. It's such a challenge. Oh God, how do I say that? Okay, what is the meaning of unlimited awareness and how to activate it? Beautiful. Okay, notice in your question, again, I'm doing satsang here. In your question, you assume that there's you, and then there's awareness, and somehow you need to kind of achieve the awareness. This is the spiritual path of almost everybody. This is the wide river of spiritual endeavor. And people will practice for 30 years, go to monasteries, go to caves and everything, because they say, oh yeah, I am the spiritual thing. Now, how do I achieve the spiritual thing? Okay, look really closely. The meaning of unlimited awareness. Are you aware right now? Are you aware of my words? Are you aware of my answer? Okay. Now, did that awareness of me and my words and what's going on in your environment, did you have to achieve that, or is it just there? See, that's it. That's all there is to it. That awareness that's aware of my words and your everything, that is the awareness. That's God. That's the I am. To say how to achieve it is the idea we hold of ourselves now, which is being perceived by awareness, right? Because no ideas think themselves, right? But this idea seems like, oh, I'm this person, this limited person, and I can now get to awareness. All of it is happening in front of awareness. Have you ever not been awareness? Just ask yourself, are you aware? How do you know? Did you have to do anything for it? Does this awareness ever go away? Think about it. Even when your attention is completely scattered, one moment you can be crystal clear, and the next moment you can be totally confused and not get everything, anything. Are either one of those happening outside awareness, or are they happening in awareness? So is awareness never not present? No. We've just been taught to look for it as an idea rather than that which is looking at the idea. Again, my favorite quote, St. Francis of Assisi, that which you are looking for is where you are looking from. It is the awareness that is saying, where do I find the awareness? All of it is happening. Mark W., greetings from Germany. Hello, Mark. Germany is one of my favorite countries. Puppy New, the more you are in the emptiness, the more life works. Mortgage and all. Yes. You find when you're in that emptiness that you are not this person attached to all of these things, that you find that it's been life's mortgage the entire time. It's simply being the way life, that you're not living life, life is living you. That you're not separate from life, you are life. That all of this is the functioning of life. And there's nothing you need to do about it, nothing you need to control, and nothing you need to fear. Because even life, all the functioning of life is happening in front of this awareness that is utterly still. And just look, can you find a beginning to this awareness? You can certainly find a beginning to consciousness, or to, our experience. This event happened, I was born, or I died, or many times, right? Whatever. All of that you can find. But does any of that appear outside of awareness? How could it? Nothing can exist outside of awareness. We imagine that it does. We imagine that this universe was here before we were consciously aware of it. We imagine that when we die, we go someplace, and then we come back to and are reborn and have a different life. But we believe that we're being born we die out of the earth, and that we're born back into the earth, and the earth is always there. But is it? This is the deepest stuff I'm inviting you all to ponder. I'm inviting you to look deep into the nature of emptiness, the nature of the true wisdom of being. That's why it's the Heart Sutra. It is the heart of the whole thing. Nuoff says, thank you, GP. Great. I get it now. Yay. Mark C, awareness equals being human. Yes. Yes. The ordinary human being is the Buddha. There's nothing exotic about it. All of this is happening within awareness. It is made of awareness. It's appearing to awareness. It's nothing but awareness. Dageng Wei, I am the experiencer, but I like certain experiences, happiness, just like the others. Suffering, is there any problem with it? Yes, there is. When you are identified with the conditioning, you will see some experiences as pleasurable and desirable, and others as painful and suffering. is, if an experience was objectively suffering, everybody would suffer when they had that experience. If the suffering was in the experience, whatever that might be, everybody would have suffering when they experienced it. But it's obvious that they don't. And in fact, you can experience one thing one day and cause you suffering, and 2 days later it doesn't, right? That's emptiness. It is not, that suffering isn't in the experience. The experience itself is empty of any objective quality. So the suffering or happiness is all in your perception of it. If you want to be permanently content and happy, drop all the perceptions and just let life be what it is. Which means, that doesn't mean a state of perpetual bliss and wonderful and life is just nothing but, rainbows and dolphins. What it means though is there's no resistance to anything that happens in life. You'll feel grief and pain if you lose somebody or lose somebody or something meaningful to you, but you won't suffer because you won't resist it. Do you see the difference? We're not trying to stop life. As Mark said, awareness equals being human. This is the play of consciousness. This is what God has created. This experience is what is happening. If I'm not identified as the person in the experience, but I'm identified as the consciousness, the awareness that is aware of the experience, I can taste the honey without suffering the honey. I can taste loss without suffering loss. And let's face it, if you're going to love, you're going to grieve, because everything is temporary. If you're terribly in love with somebody, a couple that, they just can't get enough of each other, and something happens. It falls apart. It ends for whatever reason. You're going to feel suffering. Excuse me, you're going to feel grief. You are going to feel fully the grief in absolute proportion to the amount of love. Same thing if you love somebody and they die. You are going to feel the grief. It's an indication of the love. You cannot have one without the other. To totally accept that and to recognize that, of course, we're drawn more towards the high experiences than the low experiences, but if you reject neither, you don't suffer. You are fully human. You are fully alive. Let's see, Helen. So if we control nothing, it takes care of itself. Yes, it takes care of itself whether you try to control it or not. All control does is make us think that it should be different than it is, and we create suffering, but it won't be different than it is. Life is doing life. It always has, it always will. Are you following that? We only think we control it, and we think we need to control it because we've already had a sense of separation. We've already identified with this finite self. And so now we think this finite self needs to be protected. I need to get things to be in a certain way so I feel safe. And so now I'm into the control mode. I'm trying to make things be the way I want. Can you see they all come from the same root? They all come from the identification with the conditioning instead of simply being aware of the conditioning. There's nothing wrong with conditioning, right? I can talk. I kind of like talking. I talk all the time. I talk more than most, right? Thank God for conditioning that I don't have to try to form every word, I mean, well, how do I say that? It's just a poem. It's spontaneous. Helen Ronson got it. It applies to everything. Absolutely everything. This is the beauty of the direct path of inquiry. Yes, identify is all wrong. And yes, you are not what you are perceiving. Identification is me, infinite consciousness, believing it to be confined within a body and a person, thinking that conditioning is what I am. Disidentification means the sense of I returns back to the infinite consciousness from where it arose. And that infinite I now is no longer feeling contained. It's not, the analogy I like to use is the whale in the swimming pool. Anikitos. Oh, again, all these names I'm butchering. I'm so sorry. Let's see. You had one up here. Was it primordial? I am before all matter creation? Yes. Matter of fact, matter doesn't exist. creation is through pure mind. Imagine the light passing through a prism. Light can't be seen, right? Light cannot be seen. But when it passes through the prism, suddenly you see all these things appear. An entire world appears. When I believe that what I'm looking at exists independently from me, that it is not empty, it has inherent existence, I have to explain that existence, and my explanation of that is what is called matter. It's not made of substance, of awareness. It's not made of spirit or of mind. It's made of matter. Do you understand? It's got to be made of something that you get, and that's what matter is. That's all there is to it. So it didn't make material creation. It's just God thinking about God, and the misunderstanding objectified it as matter. There is no matter. It doesn't exist. Hope you're getting that. It's very powerful when you get that. And let's see, later on, she feels like a she, but I may be wrong. I need a guru to talk about that I remember and I am. And in an infinite void and a guru to talk, and a false separation that felt devastating. Yes, false separation feels it's not an infinite void. Right? There's this is a really big deal, because the Buddha was often accused of nihilism. Oh, well, then there's nothing then. Emptiness is nothing. It's not nothingness. It's emptiness. It is not void. Right? You know, we have this idea of everything full and all this stuff and this other thing where there's nothing there, right? The fullness and the void. Emptiness is neither of those. Emptiness is the formlessness that gives rise to all form. It is the potential for everything. I mean, seeing it as potential is a great way to get to it, is a great way to understand it, because the potential for anything is here, right? But until that thing appears, there's no evidence of it. Yet the thing couldn't appear if there was no possibility of it appearing. So everything comes out of this formless potentiality, right? Are you getting that? Right? So the I am isn't an infinite void. It is self-aware existence that is even beyond space and time, and from which everything arises. Johanna in Spain, if I remember, yeah. No, Mexico, she was Mexico. Does the belief in objective reality create suffering because it is an attempt to stop life? Does the resistance reinforce the lie of a finite self and therefore suffering? Or do I hold truth? Okay. Remember who you are, right? Your mind is really trying to wrap some things around here, and I'm going to answer these questions. But I want you to just take kind of a step back. You are the self. You are the infinite self. That's all you've ever been. The belief in being a finite self arose within the infinite self. The infinite self never became a finite self. It's just experiencing itself as a finite self. Now, if you let that experience be there without the identification as the finite self, you get to taste the honey, right? There's no experience without this duality. So duality is not a mistake. All the suffering comes because I identify with what in fact is a momentary appearing. At that point, instead of it being just appearing, it becomes me. And when it becomes me, you feel like a finite self, and that's the birth of suffering. That's the fall. That is that's the end of innocence. That's, childhood's end. And when that happens, and it happens to everybody at some point early on, we feel fear and shame. We feel separate. And all of a sudden, like, I can die. Of course, you can't. It's not possible, right? But it feels that way. That's why it feels so real. And again, even that fall had to happen, because prior to that, consciousness was infinite and undivided, undifferentiated. Like a little child or like an animal. They experience everything just as it is. But in order to fully awaken to being the self, the fall had to happen so that both sides could be experienced. When that happens, the reawakening is eternal. There's no going back. You now actually are consciously aware. None of this is a mistake, folks. Nobody's made a mistake. Nobody's broken. Nobody's messed up. This is happening exactly the way it was meant to happen. It wasn't even in your Tuesday. As Judy said, I think it was Judy mentioned earlier, it's all, or something about control. Maybe it wasn't Judy. Life is just happening. Your awakening is just happening. Your awakening is just happening. Just like you're here at this thing because this is where it's meant to be. It wants to hear the truth. Hanan, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Hanan. How do we experience other suffering and not take on the suffering of others, as that can make us implode? Yes, by the more you know who you are, the more you know who everybody is. At which point you find that the energy that comes up in you, you don't identify it as yourself. And that means you can feel all the energy around you of everybody else and you don't identify with them either, which makes you the healer. There's a great example in the life of Jesus that exemplifies that. And he was walking through a big crowd of people. He was very popular at the time, and people wanted to be touched. They wanted to touch him and all that. And he was walking through this crowd, just being absolutely mobbed. His disciples are doing the best, to keep him from being, being fishermen security guards. And as the story goes, there was a woman who said she had an issue of blood for 20 years or something like that, meaning she was menstruating solid. Now it's really very powerful story, because in at that time in the Jewish law, when a woman was menstruating, they were unclean. They would even go to the red tent, right? Because they couldn't be with their, they were unclean. They were there until the period was over, then they could be part of their normal life, which means that this woman for 20 years was completely devalued. She had no value whatsoever in her in the culture. Right? She had no function as a wife and a mother and all of that kind of stuff. She was unclean. She was a pariah. She was just completely bedorim. She was a wreck. And she said, if I could just touch the hem of his garment, I'd be made whole. And that's exactly what she did. And it happened. She was made whole. Now, here's the kicker. This is really important, totally relevant to what you said about taking on the feelings and experiences of others. Jesus stopped in his tracks. He said, somebody touched me. And the disciples went, Master, there's 1,000 people around pushing on you. What do you mean somebody touched you? He said, no, someone touched me. I felt virtue go out of me. Now, we said, oh, his great power went out and his love went out. No, he felt his virtue go. He felt unvirtuous. And then he turned around and he saw the woman who did it. He said, go your way, go thy way. Your faith has made you whole. The important thing was he felt her devaluing. The difference is he didn't identify with it. And in the presence of that pure love and disidentification, it just vanished. And what happened? She got whole. That is the real healing. That's how healing really works. When I'm doing inner reconciliation sessions with people, I feel them all the time. You know, I could say, you're feeling this in your throat right now. Yeah, I am. I mean, I feel it in my body, the whole thing. I'm just not identified with it. I expect that to happen. I want that to happen. That allows me to take somebody else's energy into my space, which is much more rarefied, which is much more open because I've been working on it for so long. And it lets them experience the energy of that environment of safety that allows their own energy to begin to resolve itself and get healed. This is how healing works. It's only when you take on somebody else's feeling and you haven't resolved your own yet enough so that it becomes suffering for you. If you first learn to see through that all the feelings you're having are the result of conditioning, it's a small step to be able to take on anybody else's, which are nothing more than their conditioning, right? But you having no longer having any identification with it, it doesn't touch you. And you become a very powerful healer. Ah, beautiful. Let's see. Johanna, did I answer that for you? I hope so. Indus River, at the absolute 0 point, atoms lose their identity. Yes, you're absolutely right. Even in physics, they've been looking for it and they have yet to find it. They have not found this essential thing. Now they're talking about fields and space itself, and there's no object there, right? There's no minuscule indivisible particle there. The one place science hasn't looked is the place from which they are looking. All right, how's everybody doing? Hanan said, thank you. Yeah, you're more than welcome, my friend. You're more than welcome. The questions have begun to quiet down a little bit. I think we're getting there. I like that. If you're falling into a sense of quiet, a sense of just kind of knowing without, even if it doesn't feel like a concrete answer to the mind, if there's a sense of knowing, well, you're touching the real thing. You're exactly what it is that I want you to experience. And the place where there are no questions. You simply know. So with that, since nothing else has shown up on the queue, very, very good. As always, so wonderful to be with you all. This will be ongoing, available on YouTube and on Facebook. And all right. Oops, wait a minute. Somebody down there. Helen said, I understand that we don't die. I felt that forever. When I identify with my body, I'm terrified of death. What's that about? Well, your body is going to die. Identify with the body, you're going to feel as if you're going to die. It's really very simple. Think about it. Just put your energy right there. If I am the body, then I'm going to die, because the body does die. Now, eventually you'll see that it doesn't die because it never lived, right? It's just a combination of things happening. And that the only thing that's actually living is the consciousness that animates it. Right? But it's okay. Just don't identify with the body. And notice that the body doesn't identify with itself. The body isn't afraid of dying. It takes consciousness identified with it to create the fear of death. The body isn't afraid of dying. It's not afraid. It's dying all the time. Cells are dying and getting replenished all the time. And at some point, it's going to stop, right? We call that death. But all it is that this particular pattern, this particular form has served its purpose. It's going to dissolve, and all these little things aren't dying. They're going to become something else, right? The water in here end up in the ground, nourish some plants, maybe become a sky, go back, be with the ocean, evaporate again, right? Getting it? You getting it? You're not the body. Mark C. Blessings, GP. This is life-changing. Thank you, Mark. Indus. Big smiley with heart eyes, so I guess that means you get it. Judy saying awesome satsang. G, love and gratitude. And wonderful. Thank you up there. Okay, that's it. Thank you, everybody. I love you all, love you all, love you all. Thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to be able to go directly to the heart of it. Thank you for following me there. And I don't mind backing off. And those of you who want to learn about inner reconciliation, which is just a path I set out to make the shortest distance I possibly could. I don't call it a practice. I don't call it a discipline. It's a ways of approaching each one of these things that seem to confuse us until they come into the full understanding, at which point you find that inner reconciliation, which I love so much, is also empty. All dharmas, all teaching are empty, and even inner reconciliation can be put aside because you simply don't need it anymore. Right? But if you are interested, innerreconciliation.com, it's got an outline of it. There's all sorts of stuff available for you for those that may know nothing about it. But everything ends in the emptiness. Thank you all, getting all these wonderful hearts. Thank you all. I love you. Until next time.